the Demon Core, the small metal sphere that killed 2 scientists. In the history of science, there have been experiments that changed the world forever. Some led to incredible discoveries. Others ended in tragedy. Few stories combine both as dramatically as the story of the Demon Core, a small plutonium sphere that became responsible for 2 of the deadliest laboratory accidents ever recorded. At first glance, there was nothing particularly frightening about it. The object was only about the size of a grapefruit. It looked like an ordinary metal sphere sitting quietly on a laboratory table, produced no visible light, no sound, and no obvious sign of danger. Yet hidden within that small sphere was one of the most powerful forces known to humanity. The Demon Core never exploded. It was never dropped on a city. It was never used as a weapon in war. Yet within less than a year, it killed 2 highly trained scientists and changed the way nuclear research would be conducted forever. This is the true story of Harry Daghlian, Louis Slotin, and the deadly object that became known as the Demon Core. To understand this story, we need to go back to the final years of World War II. The world was locked in the largest conflict in human history. Millions of people had already died, and governments were desperate to find a way to end the war. At the same time, scientists had begun exploring a revolutionary idea. They had discovered that atoms could be split. When certain atoms split apart, they released enormous amounts of energy. If enough atoms split in a chain reaction, the result could be unimaginably powerful. This discovery led to one of the most secretive scientific projects ever undertaken, the Manhattan Project. Beginning in 1942, the United States gathered thousands of scientists, engineers, technicians, and military personnel to work on the development of nuclear weapons. Entire research facilities were built in secret. Many workers had no idea what they were helping create. Among the scientists involved were some of the greatest minds of the 20th century. The project's goal was simple but urgent: develop an atomic bomb before Nazi Germany could do the same. After years of research and billions of dollars in spending, the effort succeeded. On July 16, 1945, the first nuclear explosion in human history took place in the New Mexico desert during the Trinity test. Witnesses described a blinding flash of light brighter than anything they had ever seen. A massive fireball rose into the sky. The shockwave traveled for miles. The atomic age had begun. Just weeks later, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The destruction shocked the world and played a major role in bringing World War II to an end. However, there was another plutonium core waiting at Los Alamos. Military planners had expected that a 3rd bomb might be necessary if Japan refused to surrender. That 3rd bomb was already being prepared. But Japan surrendered before it could be used. As a result, the plutonium core remained in New Mexico. Instead of becoming part of a weapon, it became a research tool. Scientists wanted to learn more about how fissile materials behaved under different conditions. They hoped this knowledge would improve both scientific understanding and future nuclear technology. Unfortunately, the experiments they performed were extraordinarily dangerous. The plutonium sphere contained about 6.2 kilograms of plutonium. By itself, the core was not immediately lethal. The danger came from the possibility of pushing it into a critical state. Criticality occurs when a nuclear chain reaction becomes self-sustaining. Each nuclear event causes additional events, creating a continuous reaction. If conditions become even more favorable, the material can enter a supercritical state. In that condition, radiation levels increase dramatically. The challenge was determining exactly where those boundaries existed. Scientists designed experiments to slowly move the core closer and closer to criticality. The problem was that the difference between safe and deadly could be incredibly small. A single mistake could have catastrophic consequences. Researchers at Los Alamos even developed a nickname for these experiments. They called them tickling the dragon's tail. The phrase reflected the idea that they were deliberately approaching danger without crossing the line. Unfortunately, the line was much thinner than many realized. The first victim was a young physicist named Harry Daghlian. Daghlian was born in 1921 and showed remarkable intelligence from an early age. He studied physics and eventually joined the Manhattan Project. By the summer of 1945, he was only 24 years old but already contributing to some of the most advanced scientific research in the world. Colleagues respected him for his intelligence and dedication. On the evening of August 21, 1945, Daghlian was working in a laboratory at Los Alamos. Most other researchers had already left for the day. He was conducting an experiment involving the plutonium core and a series of tungsten carbide bricks. The purpose of the bricks was to reflect neutrons. When neutrons escaped from the plutonium, the bricks would bounce some of them back toward the core. As more neutrons returned, the chain reaction became stronger. The more bricks that surrounded the core, the closer it moved toward criticality. Daghlian carefully stacked the bricks one by one. Instruments monitored the increasing neutron activity. Everything appeared to be proceeding normally. Then, in a single moment, everything changed. While positioning another brick above the assembly, Daghlian accidentally dropped it. The brick fell directly onto the structure. Instantly, the core became supercritical. A burst of radiation flooded the room. Witnesses later described a blue flash. Daghlian immediately realized what had happened. He quickly removed the brick, stopping the reaction. But the exposure had already occurred. The radiation dose he received was enormous. Within hours, he began suffering from nausea and vomiting. His left hand, which had been closest to the assembly, sustained severe radiation damage. Doctors quickly understood the seriousness of the situation. Acute radiation syndrome is one of the most devastating injuries the human body can experience. Radiation damages cells throughout the body, particularly those that divide rapidly. Bone marrow, digestive tissues, and immune system cells are especially vulnerable. As the days passed, Daghlian's condition worsened. His immune system weakened. His body struggled to produce new blood cells. Pain increased. Complications multiplied. Medical treatments available at the time were extremely limited. Doctors could offer supportive care, but there was no effective cure. Friends, family, and colleagues watched as his condition steadily deteriorated. For nearly 4 weeks, he fought for survival. Finally, on September 15, 1945, Harry Daghlian died. He was only 24 years old. His death shocked Los Alamos. Many scientists believed the accident would lead to major changes. Instead, the dangerous experiments continued. Researchers still wanted more data. Some believed the accident had been caused by human error rather than flaws in the experimental design itself. That assumption would prove fatal. The second victim was Louis Slotin. Born in Canada in 1910, Slotin was an experienced physicist who had become one of the leading experts in handling fissile materials. Unlike Daghlian, Slotin had extensive practical experience working directly with nuclear assemblies. He had even participated in preparations related to the Trinity test. Colleagues often described him as highly skilled, confident, and sometimes willing to take risks. By 1946, Slotin was conducting a different type of criticality experiment using the same plutonium core. Instead of tungsten carbide bricks, he used 2 hemispheres made from beryllium. Like the bricks, the beryllium reflected neutrons back toward the plutonium. As the hemispheres moved closer together, more neutrons returned to the core. This increased the intensity of the nuclear reaction. The experiment required maintaining a very small gap between the 2 hemispheres. As long as the gap remained open, the system stayed below criticality. If the gap disappeared, the core could become supercritical almost instantly. Today, such a procedure would be performed using remote-controlled equipment behind protective barriers. Slotin used a screwdriver. The screwdriver was placed between the hemispheres to keep them separated. The entire experiment depended on maintaining control of that single tool. Many observers considered the method dangerous. Some colleagues reportedly felt uncomfortable watching the demonstrations. Nevertheless, Slotin had performed them numerous times before. Each successful experiment reinforced confidence. On May 21, 1946, several scientists gathered to observe another demonstration. Slotin positioned the plutonium core inside the lower hemisphere. He then carefully lowered the upper hemisphere into place. Using the screwdriver, he maintained the narrow gap between them. Everyone in the room focused on the assembly. Then disaster struck. The screwdriver slipped. For a brief instant, the hemispheres closed. The core became supercritical. Witnesses described seeing a bright blue flash. Several people later reported feeling a sudden sensation of heat. The room had been exposed to an intense burst of radiation. Slotin immediately understood the situation. Without hesitation, he knocked the upper hemisphere away with his hand. The reaction stopped. His quick action almost certainly prevented an even greater disaster. The other scientists in the room received radiation exposure, but Slotin absorbed the largest dose by far. He had effectively shielded the others with his own body. Almost immediately, he began experiencing symptoms. As he left the laboratory, he reportedly started calculating how much radiation each person had received. He knew the consequences could be severe. Doctors soon confirmed their fears. The dose Slotin had received was far beyond what the human body could survive. His condition deteriorated rapidly. He suffered intense nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and weakness. His white blood cell count collapsed. Internal organs began failing. Medical staff carefully documented every stage of his illness. The records became some of the most important case studies of radiation exposure ever collected. Scientists hoped that understanding the effects might help future victims. Unfortunately, nothing could save Slotin. 9 days after the accident, on May 30, 1946, he died. He was 35 years old. The same plutonium core had now killed 2 scientists in less than a year. Only after Slotin's death did officials fully recognize the danger of these experiments. Major changes followed. Hands-on criticality experiments were largely abandoned. Remote control systems became standard. Protective shielding increased. Strict safety protocols were introduced. Researchers were required to maintain greater distances from fissile materials. The accidents became powerful lessons for future generations. The impact extended far beyond Los Alamos. Nuclear facilities around the world began adopting stronger safety practices. The deaths of Daghlian and Slotin helped shape modern radiation safety standards. Their experiences demonstrated that even highly trained experts could make mistakes. Safety systems needed to account for human error. One particularly important lesson involved the concept of normalization of risk. When people perform dangerous tasks repeatedly without incident, they can gradually become comfortable with the danger. Each successful experiment reinforces the belief that the procedure is safe. Warnings become routine. Risks begin to feel normal. Many historians believe this played a role in the Demon Core accidents. Scientists had conducted similar experiments multiple times. Nothing bad had happened before. As a result, some researchers underestimated the danger. The consequences were tragic. Eventually, the plutonium from the Demon Core was melted down and reused in other nuclear programs. The original sphere ceased to exist, yet its story survived. Interestingly, the nickname Demon Core was not commonly used at the time of the accidents. The name became popular later as historians looked back on the object's deadly history. Today, it is one of the most famous objects associated with the Manhattan Project. Books, documentaries, articles, and videos continue to examine what happened. Part of the fascination comes from the contrast between appearance and reality. The Demon Core looked ordinary. It sat quietly on a table. There was no visible sign of its danger. Yet hidden within it was enough radioactive potential to cause catastrophic harm. The story also raises important questions about scientific ambition. Progress often requires taking risks. Many of humanity's greatest discoveries involved people pushing beyond established limits. At the same time, history repeatedly shows the importance of balancing innovation with caution. The scientists who worked with the Demon Core were not careless amateurs. They were highly educated experts working at the forefront of human knowledge. Yet even they underestimated the dangers they faced. That reality makes the story even more unsettling. The deaths of Harry Daghlian and Louis Slotin were not caused by ignorance alone. They occurred during a period when humanity was learning to understand an entirely new force of nature. The lessons learned from their accidents continue to influence laboratories, hospitals, power plants, and research facilities around the world. Modern radiation safety practices exist in part because of what happened at Los Alamos. Distance, shielding, remote operation, and strict procedures all reflect lessons paid for with human lives. Today, nearly 80 years later, the Demon Core remains one of the most chilling stories in scientific history. Not because of a massive explosion, not because of a mushroom cloud, but because a small metal sphere sitting quietly in a laboratory revealed just how dangerous invisible forces can be. The Demon Core never became a weapon of war. Instead, it became something else entirely. A warning, a reminder that even the brightest minds can make mistakes, and proof that some of the most dangerous objects in history do not look dangerous at all.